Hi, welcome back. So today we are going to pick up where we left off with our Maya 2022 intro video, and we're going to make the 3D model that we're going to use. In the previous video, we learned about Maya, how to some of the user interface, how to move around, how to create some things inside of Maya. Today we're going to continue building on that and create a three-dimensional bug. I'm making an ant. You can choose to make another bug while you follow along. The similar kind of concepts and processes are which should apply to anything else. Or you can just go ahead and follow along doing what I'm doing. That's up to you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is we're going to first get ourselves oriented, and the other thing I want to do is my orientation and kind of playing around. But if you look at your lower left-hand screen in the viewport, you'll see there's a gizmo down here, okay? And right now, I'm in the perspective view. So the little gizmo, this is my X direction, up is my Y direction, and forward and backwards in the screen is your Z, okay? And you can see the Z screen right there. And Z is facing towards me. I have X to the right. That'll be all right. We'll start with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about getting inspiration and some places where we can find some of those images that you might want to use. Because we're going to make a bug, and you can work from memory, but another thing you can do is, of course, the internet is crowded with all kinds of imagery. If you just Google anything, you can let's see here, bugs, right? How about ants? Since we're going to do ants, you can type in ant and then find images, right? And my internet has decided it doesn't want to go fast. Why not? Okay. All right, well, bear with me for a second. There it goes. Strange. Okay, so there are all kinds of inspirations. You can do that just right from here if you want to. And that is perfectly good for using inspirations and finding reference images while you are working. But if you're going to put something on the internet and you're going to use it, you probably, or kind of reference it, you probably want to use something that has no royalties or rights on it. So there are plenty of websites out there that have royalty-free images. One of the ones that you can use would be Unsplash. Okay, and Unsplash has a lot of royalty-free. People post things on here. Some are working artists. Some are, trying to find jobs through this process here. But they're posting up examples of their work, and all of this is licensed through Unsplash. You can use most of it, but sometimes you'll need to. They ask that you do attribution. So in other words, list the person who you're using. So again, if I want to do ant, okay, you'll see that quite a few examples come up, and I actually landed on this first one right here. So I'm using an image from Peter Wolf here, and then I also found another one, and I'm not sure it's, yeah, here it is right here. This one is from Wolfgang Hasselmann, and I'm using a couple different angles from these ants to kind of give me an idea of what it is they look like, kind of get a feel. Now, we're not making this to be 100% accurate, okay? This is not going to be accurate to what an ant looks like. As you saw from that image, we're making a model that bears resemblance to an ant, but we're not going to get into all the details of modeling it specifically like this, okay? So let me go ahead and close this real quick. Okay. I'll just minimize it out of the way. All right, so pull these up. Now, when we take a look at the ant, you can see that the body, the legs are pretty long. The body's got multiple segments to it, so there's 3 segments. There's actually kind of this 4th connecting segment, but we're not going to, like I said, we're not making this identical to an ant. It is going to be a model that has a resemblance to an object or an animal, in this case, or an ant, the bug. So, but it's not going to be 100% identical. You can also see that the legs, the way they're set up, are a little bit different. Okay, this one is a shorter. It may be actually a little longer or similar in length to this, but this definitely got some more thickness to it. And then this back leg is much longer. So this means we're going to end up having to model each one of these legs individually. And then the antenna, presumably, are about the same length. Eyes are going to be on either side of the head. There's some pinchers. But we're not going to get into creating high detail. It's not going to be a high detail model. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at this other image real quick. And the reason why we've got a couple different images. So from the back, you can see that this part of the body is rounded and thicker. Then there is this, it's kind of skinny through here in this shape. It's not really rounded. I mean, there's rounded edges here, but it's more length than it is wide. And then the head has sort of this triangular shape around it. And then down here around the pinchers, it actually kind of comes down to a point. So that's what we're going to shoot for. And we're going to go ahead and get started with that right now. Let me check in real quick where we're at. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started and rough out our bug. What I'm going to use mostly for this is the sphere. Okay, we're going to start with the sphere. So if you click on the sphere right up here, you can see that we get it popping in right here in the center. If we take a look over here at our attribute editor, the information for the sphere, so this very first one right here, we have our translation, our rotation, our scale. Right now it's all set to 0. The scale is set to 1. And these are Maya scale numbers. So 1 is basically whenever we reset it, it's going to set it back to a 1. But as we start to scale it up and change it, these numbers will change, and you can see that as we move it around. So translate is done in, these are all done in X, Y, and Z. So X, Y, and Z for these 3. That's why there's 3 across here. So if I move it to the left, you'll see that X moves because I'm moving along the X axis. If I move it up, you'll see the Y moves because I'm moving along the Y axis. And then the blue one, if I grab that and move it, you'll see that it moves as well. And the different directions tell me the different numbers here. So negative in front tells me I'm moving in the negative direction in the X, negative in the Z, up is positive Y. That also lets me know that I have my screen set up in the right direction, because if I rotate it upside down, you can't tell the difference other than when you look down here or here, your Y is pointing in the wrong direction. So be aware of that. I do have occasionally students who model things upside down because they lost their direction. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to put it back to 0, and you can click in here and you can change numbers and it'll move it right back. So I could change all these to 0 and it'll put it right back at the origin. Now this is the origin for it at the very beginning. When we go to, if we go to move it, and when we freeze these transformations, which I'll show you later, what that does is it zeroes it wherever it's at in your 3D space. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pull this over a little bit, and I am going to pull it up a little bit, and I'm going to rotate this. So I'm going to hit E on my keyboard I'm going to rotate it forward just a little bit like this. Not quite 90 degrees. And if I rotate it, you can see over here, I am rotating it in the Y direction. I've rotated it negative 79.244, right? So those are, these are ways, so if you have a specific position that you need to put it in, or you want to rotate it 90 degrees, you can just come in here and type 90, right? And now it's perfectly centered, and it actually rotated it back the other direction so that it's not negative anymore. And it doesn't really matter if it's negative or positive for what we're working on right here, but it may matter for you in other things that you may model in the future. So keep in mind, you can put a negative in front to make it negative, or you can just type it in without the negative and it'll put it in a positive direction. All right, I don't want it to be perfectly flat like that because the ant's body kind of comes down a little bit. Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to hit R on my keyboard, and I'm going to scale this, and I'm going to scale it just in the Y direction. Now that it's rotated, it may seem like it's actually in the X direction, but because I've rotated it, okay, I've rotated it, so now it is rotated it, this Y direction has changed. And one thing we can do, we can double click on our tools here. So if you double click on one of these, you can bring up your settings. And I misspoke earlier. I said when we brought these into the world, when we created them, hit this little button and they pop into our 3D world. They were in the world, and they may still be. Let's see here. Let me reset my tool. Nope, they come in an object. Okay. All right. So with this selected, you can right here at your axis orientation check to see what it's in. So if I go to world, you'll see that basically my gizmo has now changed so that it is oriented to the world. Okay. So as we start to adjust models and change things, we need to decide when we're moving it, scaling it, how we want it to do that. Basically, whether it's to the object or whether it is to the world around the object. So for example, if I go back into my object mode and I hit W, it pops it automatically back to world for me, okay? But scale, sorry, if I go back to scale, you see that it keeps it to the object. So that's another thing that I may have been a little confused on, or confusing you on, I apologize, but each of the different modes will put this gizmo into a different axis orientation. And if you want to change that axis orientation, you can double click on the tool and bring it up, and right here is where you can come in and change the axis orientation. And there we go. All right, so there you go. And I just changed it back to world, so let's go ahead and change that back to object. There we go. And I'm going to close that before I mess anything else up. All right, so there we go. We've got it elongated a little bit, and it's beginning to look a little bit like an ant body. I'm sorry if I don't know the specific terms for the different parts of an ant body. I didn't study up on the ant anatomy. All right, so as we start to look at it, and yeah, my reference picture will pop away. Now there is a way to embed our reference pictures into our scenes, into our panels here, and this might be a good time to demonstrate that. I don't always put these in. A lot of times I'll just work with them off to the side on a second screen. But if you don't have a second screen and you're trying to go back and forth, one nice thing, or if you're trying to actually use the reference image to model to, one thing you can do is you can park these or put these inside of Maya into a different window. So let's go ahead and do that real quick, okay? Let me show you how to do that. And at this point, I've also realized that I have made a huge error because what I want to do is I wanted to show you how to do a proper setup when we first got started. And I made that mistake of not getting our project set up because I already had it open. I started talking about it and we just kind of moved right into it. But don't worry, once we get things started and you realize, oh no, I forgot to set my project up, we can always go back in and set our project up. The best thing to do is set your project up at the very beginning, but sometimes you get carried away, you're trying some ideas out, and next thing you know, you're a little bit into the model and you realize I need to make it so that I can save my model, and I also need to set it up so that it saves it properly into a project. So a project is this right here, okay? Up here under File, we're going to go to File, and we're going to go down and we're going to open this thing up called Project Window right here. So we click on Project Window, and this pops in, all right? This project window allows us to create a new project. So right here I'm going to click New, and when I click on New, it's going to set this up as a new project for me. So I can click in here, and we're going to call this Ant, and I'm just going to call it Course. Now if you want to make a different bug than an ant, you certainly are welcome to do that. The methods I'm teaching you here you can think about it and you can modify it. You don't have to make an ant. But certainly if you just want to follow along, you can do that as well. Okay? So I'm just going to call this ant. I already have one called ant demo, so we'll just call this, I'll just call it ant class. How about that? All right, and then we can choose the project we want to put it in. Now, typically, when you click on that, what I do is I will set up a main project folder, okay? And I have a project folder that I've already created called Maya Projects 2022, and that's because I'm using version 2022, but also because it's almost, this next school year is going to be 2021, 2022, but it's going to end in 2022, so that's how I kind of set my project folders up the year that I'm working in. Once I do that, it's going to go here into, right now it wants to go into Ant Demo. I don't want it to go into that. I want it to go into the main project folder. So if I hit the up arrow one more time, you can see I have all these different folders in here. I have one right here called Maya 2022, and that's where I want this project to go into. If I had left it with this selected, it would put a project inside a project. We want to avoid that. Once you have it selected, you click Select down here, and now it'll put this new project inside of my project folder. All of these are default folders that will be created inside of our project. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Accept. And now if I go back into my project, and actually let me open up a different folder. Let's see here. I'll start there. D drive. All right, so if I go into my project folder, into my Ant class, all of those folders are here, okay? And I did not mean to do that. So everything that, these are basic folders. You can always add more folders if you wanted to. You can change names of folders, but I typically leave them as default, especially when I'm working with other people. We either agree on our naming convention for our folders, so there will be a standard setup and naming convention for these, or we'll just leave it at default, and if we need to add folders, we will talk about that and add these folders so that everybody knows where the different assets are that we need, and everybody understands the naming convention. This is sort of the basic generic one, and that's usually what we use most of the time. Now, source images, I guess actually let me, before I get ahead of myself, let's go ahead and now that we've got our project window set up, we still haven't saved this, and we need to do one other thing, okay? Now, before when I opened this, you saw that it wanted to put this in my previous example, which was the Ant demo, and that was because that was open. What I want to do is, after I have my project window set, and where anytime I want to work with a project that I've already created, I want to set my project. So I'm going to come in here and select Set Project, and this is going to be my project for this one is Ant class. I'm going to click and hit Set. Now, anytime I go to do File, Save As, or whatever, it's going to look into that project folder, in the appropriate folder, and it's going to put that project in there, or it's going to look for assets inside that project. So now I'm going to go back to File, and I'm going to do File, Save Scene As, okay? And at File, Save Scene As, basically, we're going to give this a name. I'm just going to call this my Ant Basic. Okay, and I'm going to hit Enter. And now, if I go back into my folders here, and I go into the ones called scenes, because that's where it's going to save this. There's my file. It's now saved. And if I take a look up here at the top, you'll see that now it's telling me it is in my Maya projects, in the Ant class project folder, in the scenes folder, and this is the name of this scene, Ant Basic. So everything is up here now. And it also tells me I have Sphere 1 selected as well. Okay. Go ahead, and the next thing we want to do, before I exit out of here, is source images. So source images are where we're going to put things like textures or anything that we're going to pull into our project that is of an imagery base. It's external or comes external from inside our project. So external from our project. So those two images that I'm using as reference, I'm going to grab both of these and I'm going to drag and drop them into here. Okay. The one that I'm mainly going to use is this one right here. So now that they're in here, into my source images, close that. Okay. What I can do is I'm going to go back into my screen here. So I want the 4 images, and I'm going to put one of those images here on my side panels. Okay. So right here where it says panels, I'm going to click on panels. I'm sorry, view. I'm ahead of myself. So we're going to go to view. We're going to go to view image, okay? Or image plane down here, rather. Image plane. And we're going to import image. Okay, again, we're going to go to view, image plane, import image. This window will pop up, and notice it went right to my source images for my project. And if I click on the one I want, it gives me a little picture. It says, okay, there it is. I'm going to say open. And now what it's done is down here, and you want to make sure that you do it in this side view. If you do it here in the perspective, it's going to put it right in your face. It's going to be right there, and you can't see around it. Try to move around it, you won't be able to do anything with it. It's just right there in your face. But here, it is in my side view. And if I take a look at it from the top, you see that it's right there. I'm going to hit W on my keyboard, and I'm going to push it back. That's here. I'm going to pull it. That's the X. That's here. That's my X screen. I'm working kind of that direction. We're going to put it this way. Just see how that looks. And actually, yeah, actually I think I wanted to put it on the, instead of the side, I probably wanted to put it on the front and then push it back. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and delete that. I'm going to do the same thing over here now in the front. Now you may have your orientation a little bit different, so you may have to kind of decide how that's going to work for you. I'm going to go back to my image plane, import image. I'm going to select that same image, open it. Now it's going to be here, and it should line up a little bit better with my project. And I am going to pull it back so that it will line up a little bit better. And you know what? I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. (180 degrees rather, so it's kind of lined up to the... Alright, come on. There we go. And this here. Like that. Okay. So now it's lined up. And I'm going to push it, I've got to push back a little bit. And I'm going to scale it down a little bit. So you can do all these same things with this image plane that you can do with your models. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and kind of get this lined up a little bit. And like I said, this is just going to be a quick reference. I'm not going to actually use it to outline, but I am going to use it kind of as a reference, maybe even set it up so I can see it a little bit better. Okay, so now there it is. The next thing we want to do is we want to make it so that we kind of lock this thing out so we can't accidentally move it around. And notice that because I have brought these planes in, if you take a look over here in your outliner, it has now made it so that you can grab your front and side cameras. So let's deal with those real quick. I'm going to select both of those and hit Control H so we can't accidentally select them. We don't want to accidentally move our cameras around. The other thing we want to do is right here, select the image plane again, go to your channel box this time. It's not open, it's right up here, these little stack of papers. And then down here at the bottom, okay, we have this inputs, we have a display box, and we have things that say layers, options, help, etc. So what I want to do is, with it selected, we can create layer from selected. We're going to select that, and we can double click on it. Once it pops up like this, you double click on it, and you can just call this, I'm just going to call it ref image. So I know what it is. I'm going to save it. You can create different colors for it. But what I want to do is, down here you see that you've got these little boxes with different letters in them. This one right here is, if we click on it, it makes it transparent. Click on it again, it makes it so that it's a reference, and by doing that, when we change it to R down there, you can't accidentally click on it anymore. You can click on it over here and select it, but in the actual scene itself, you cannot select it you cannot accidentally select it. And if you ever need to make this disappear so you can see the other sides of your model, if it's in your way, you can always come in back here and change it to T for transparent. Okay? Alright, so now that we've got that done, we've got a reference image in here, so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth. And I think I am going to raise it up just a little bit, so I can kind of see it a little bit better. I'm looking at it. So now, there we go. Let's go ahead and save everything again. Close that one down. Let's see how long we can do on this. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Okay, so we got the initial part of our ant's body setup. Kind of looks like that a little bit. You can tell that it's a little bit flatter here on the end. Like I said, we're not going to do this piece here. We are going to bring in something like this, and before we finish up with this, it does kind of come to a little bit more of a point here. And this is an opportunity for us to kind of take a look at adjusting our model using our vertices. So basically, if it's green like this, you're in the object mode. If I right click and go to vertex, you'll see that it has now changed everything to purple dots. Those are our vertices. Those are the intersections between the edges. Okay. The way a model works is you have these vertices, so these points that are the connection points between edges. Okay. So you need 3 edges to have a face, so a surface area. If you only have 2 edges, you don't have the ability to connect it to close it out, so you don't have a face. So you need at least 3 edges. Maya likes to work with quads, although edges are perfectly, triangles are perfectly fine. Maya likes quads, but if you get into polygons that have, or if you get into having 5 or more edges, Maya doesn't like that. Okay, so you need to, when you're modeling, you need to keep in mind that you're working with either 3 sides or you're working with 4 sides. Anything above that, you need to figure out how to fix your model so that it only has either 3 or 4 edges, okay? Now what we're going to do in this vertice mode is we're going to go to the paint right here. We're going to select paint. I'm going to hold the B key and shrink it down a little bit. And I want to select everything right here on the end. So I'm just going to kind of run my brush over it like this. Okay, and when you're making selections, you want to make sure you're not accidentally selecting something else. Now, you could do a marquee select. So if you were in this and you did a marquee select, and I'll do that real quick and then we'll come back to this. But if you do a marquee select like this, and you're wanting to select the ones on the side, only the ones on the side, what happens with a marquee select is it selects everything that it can see on that model, on both sides, and if there was an inside, it would select everything inside. So you got to make sure that you're only selecting the vertices that you want, and then double check to make sure you didn't accidentally select the other ones. The thing about the paint and the lasso is the lasso works like a marquee, but you can control and kind of make some funky shape ones. So instead of just a square box like the Marquee, you can make a lasso, which is kind of the whole point of the lasso, and make it kind of an odd shape and select it that way. And then the paint one, as you just saw, will only select the ones that we touch with the mouse, okay? So if I hit Control Z, it'll get rid of that and it'll go back to the selection I had. So if you ever accidentally click off or change something, if you hit Control Z, it'll go back to your previous selection, which is nice. So now with those selected, I'm going to hit W. I'm going to pull these out a little bit to kind of give it that shape, kind of like the back of the ant body. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to now go back to my regular selection and just click that center one right there. Hit W again and just pull it out a little bit further. Kind of give it that pointed look. And you can compare that. And you can shrink this down so that it's more visible. It doesn't have to be giant like this, but we kind of got that matched a little bit now. It doesn't, like I said, we're not making this identical, but there's some little tiny details that sell it that kind of stand out a little bit better than others. And this is one of those that might make it look different than just being a elongated sphere, right? So made like a zeppelin or something. All right, so next thing we want to do is I'm going to hit Q to quit my tool, and I'm going to go back to object mode. And right here, since this is named right here, the way to change naming is double click on it, and this will be, I'm just going to call this lower body. Okay. Now we've got a name for it. The next thing we want to do is we want to now make this part of the ant's body. Okay, and what we're going to do is I'm going to bring up another one. W here real quick. And kind of rotate it out that direction. And I'm going to hit R. I'm going to scale it. And it's about the same length or same size as that one right there. And what we could have done is we could have duplicated it, but we kind of made some changes to that model, so we're just going to leave it this way. And now what we want to do is we want to kind of flatten it a little bit, skinny it out a little bit. And definitely this way as well. And one of the things we notice is that this is a little bit more rounded up here. I'm not going to get into the detail here, bringing it forward like this. This will be close enough. But we do want to maybe flatten the bottom part of the body down here. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go in, and I'm going to go again, right click and hold and go to vertex. Okay. I'm going to select my paintbrush for my selection. And from underneath, I'm going to just kind of do selections across here. See what that looks like. Okay, and it looks like this is my center point right here, so I need to go over one more row here. Okay, if you accidentally select something that you don't want to select, you can hold the control button, and run over it, and it will deselect it. So you can also add additional ones. Now with the paintbrush, you don't need to do this because the paintbrush will continually add. It's in the add position, just the way it works. But in other selection tools, and we'll get into that, if you hold the shift button, you can do multiple selections or continue adding to your selection, and the control button will subtract. Okay. Now with those selected, I'm going to hit R on my keyboard, and I'm going to push the red one up a little bit. I'm going to start pushing it up to kind of flatten this out. Okay. And then let's see, if we hit W, and now it's oriented to the world, okay? So what I want to do is I want to change the orientation of this gizmo. to the object. I'll push it up just a little bit too. Kind of give it more of a kind of an indented look, maybe. No, I think maybe we'll just kind of leave it like that. And now I'm going to hit R on the keyboard again, and I'm going to squeeze this in just a little bit. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is right at this line on both sides here, what I want to do is I want to select those in addition to what we already have. So I'm going to leave it the way it is. And I think maybe, yeah, I think this will work. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to close this, do my paintbrush selection. I'm going to select these additional ones along the side here. And over here as well. Okay. R again. I'm just going to kind of pull that in a little bit. Kind of give it a spot for the legs to go. Again, it doesn't have to be identical. We're not going to, as you can see, there's a lot of detail on the back of this ant. We're not going to get into that detail there. Just something that gives it an appearance that is kind of a spot where legs might go. We can even pull it a little bit more. All right, so I think that's a good approximation of the body. Go ahead and quit my tool. Q to quit the tool. Hit Q on your keyboard and quit. Go to right click and hold. Go to object mode. And actually I'm going to hit W. We're going to move this back a little bit. Maybe up. I'm just going to kind of park it on there like that for right now. I think we can get away with maybe even making this more skinny. So R on your keyboard to get the scale tool, pull it in like that. Now the last thing we're going to work on, and then we're going to put the head on it. Okay. All right, and so to the head is more, kind of more rounded. What we're going to do is we're also going to use a sphere for that. So back up here, I'm going to select another sphere. Okay. I'm going to pull it up. I want to be able to elongate it so that it moves out this direction, but I also want to kind of leave that rounded part back here. And then if we had taken a look at the other ant pictures, we can kind of see that the head is wider on the back here and it has more of a point down in here. So that's kind of what we're going to try to emulate with this. And again, I'm going to rotate this. Let's see here. I think I'll rotate it backwards. Head's going to be pointing down like that. This is going to be the back of the head. And I'll get it started. What I want to do is I'm going to select kind of in the middle of the sphere down and kind of start to scale it down a little bit, okay? And one of the easier ways to probably do that selection is if this was actually rotated at either 90 degrees or back at 0 or at 180 degrees. So basically sideways where I could do a Marquee Select. I could do one of these other ones, but sometimes it's just quicker to do that type of selection. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this at 90 degrees. And right here, and make sure that you have the point right there. Here is the center point of the sphere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right click and I'm going to go back into vertice and I'm going to do a Marquee Select so that I select this part of the sphere. I'm going to hit R initially. I'm going to start shrinking things down a little bit. I'm going to get that movement started downward. And I also want to hit W, and I'm going to kind of start to elongate things just a little bit. Just a little tab on that. And now I'm going to do another marquee select. This time I'm going to only select those lines right in there. I'm going to hit R again. And okay, so this is a good point for me to talk about another way of doing scaling. And we really haven't got into it yet, but if you take a look at the tool, okay, again, we talked about X, Y, and Z, right? Then there's these little square boxes kind of hovering off into the side here from the different directions, okay, in between these two axes. What these are is these allow you to do scaling along a plane, okay, or movement along a plane, or even what we're going to do is I'm going to rotate it this way so I can see this square right here. And if I grab it and I start to scale it down this way, it'll scale everything evenly along that plane, okay? And you can kind of see that there. Okay, and then if I hit W, I'm going to just grab it along the axis and pull forward a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing again from the side view. Now, if you're having trouble doing the selection without accidentally grabbing other things, that's where jumping back and forth between, or having a double window open even, and then let's see, this would be the other side view. So if you open up, you can't see your model because the screen is in the way, because the model here is in the way. What we can do is we can go to Orthographic, go to New, and we have a side view. It's either the left or the right. I think that one is the right one, so we want the left one. Okay. Not so much. Okay. All right. So my orientation is a little bit off. Instead of being side, I'm at the front. That's okay. Let's see here. So this is probably the back that I want. So Orthographic, New, and I'm going to select back. There we go. All right. So now you can see from the side view, if you wanted to do these selections, you can do it here, just the same as we were just doing it. So if I go back to Vertex, now in the orthographic view, it may be a little bit easier for you to do that, okay? And then you can use your perspective view to get back around and stuff. And then scale this down a little bit, pull it out just a little bit. And this is the kind of the process we're going to be doing. We're going to be just slowly shrinking this thing down so we get it to the point that we want and elongate it the way we want it. And that was not good. My bad. Let's go back to the scale tool. My bad. I lost track of what I was doing. Okay. Move it. That's what happens when I'm talking and trying to work at the same time. Go back to scale tool. Shrink it down. Smooth it out. One of the things we also notice is that the head is rounded here and kind of flat down at the bottom. We are going to address that once we kind of get the shape that we want here first, okay? And we're getting closer. It kind of starts to come down pretty quick here. So let's go ahead and let's see here. Scale this again. Pop it back and forth like that. You can do all that from right here. It's bad habits. go ahead and start to bring this out even further, maybe. Scale this down quicker. And just do this last selection right here. Scale it. Actually, let's pull it out first. Okay, so that'll get us started. Now the next thing we want to do is we do want to kind of flatten this and bring these up a little bit. So what we're going to do is, it's really this section right in here, okay? We want to flatten out. So let's initially start with a Marquee Select up to here. Okay. And now if you hold the Shift key down, we can do a Marquee Select and add pieces in. You can just do a little bit like this, and it's going to select not only the front, but it'll also select the back area as well. So hold the Shift button down, do a Marquee Select. Now this is where I'm having a little bit of issue being able to see what I'm doing because I've got it kind of embedded into another model. So this is kind of a good point in time to show you how to hide things. So if I right click, go to object mode, and I can select this piece right here. And if I hit, so the body piece, if it's Shift 1, it'll hide everything else. So Shift 1 back. Let's go ahead and select our model back. Shift 1 on that, it'll hide everything else. There we go. Sorry about that. Control 1 would hide everything except for the one that you have selected. Okay, so now we've got that done. Let's go ahead and right click and go back to vertice. And you can see our selection is still good. And unfortunately, it only did it in that one screen for me. So that's the other thing about the viewports. It only makes those things disappear in the... so Control 1 makes everything disappear, okay, except for the model you're working with. And now, because this is kind of backwards like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the paint selector here, and I'm just going to hold the B key down, shrink that down a little bit, and then only select the ones I want. Hold the Control button to deselect ones you don't want. And let's see here. Pretty good. Leave that one alone for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit R on the keyboard. If we push down on this, it's going to kind of flatten all this out for me. Let's see what that's looking like from the side here. So I'm going to flatten all that out. I'm going to hit W and start to drag it up a little bit. R again to kind of flatten it out a little bit more. W. All right, so now we've adjusted this. We've used a couple different tools to be able to kind of create this look that we wanted. We get the general shape of the ant head. Let's go ahead and hit Control 1 in both these viewports and bring it back and kind of see how it's looking. Go right click, object mode, hit Q to quit the tool if it's a distraction. And you can kind of see that we've got a general shape of our ant head. And I think we got a good start. Okay. All right, so the next thing we need to do is, I'm just going to go back into perspective view. Hit the hover over it, hit the space bar. So now with that kind of started, let's go ahead and create some legs. Okay. So for the legs, what I want to do is I want to, is the head a little big? Let's see if the head looks a little bit big. I'm wondering if the head's looking a little bit big. You know what? Actually, the width of the head is about the same width as the back of the body here. So if we hit R on our keyboard, We can scale it down in that plane just a little bit. I'm thinking the head was a little bit too big. Something like that. All right, there we go. Now let's go ahead and work on our legs. I'm going to bring in a cylinder, so right up here, click on cylinder. And we're going to pick one side of the body or the other to work on. So I'm going to go ahead and just move it over here. Drag this up. I'm going to hit R on the keyboard to kind of scale it down a little bit. And I'm going to use, again, this plane here. So if I look down, I'm going to use the Y-axis plane. And I'll pull this in and shrink this down to about the diameter of what I think the legs should start off with anyway. We're going to start with the front leg, and we can see that it kind of comes down like this and then kind of out and then down. So we have 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 segments here. This one also seems to move, but these become more like an antenna, so they have multiple pieces to them. We're not going to get that detailed. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and rotate it. Let's see, we're going to rotate it back that way. And bring back up R, shrink this down a little bit. Scale it in some more. So it's skinnier. And this is where you're going to start to see what I was talking about with trying to get things lined up and doing it in a perspective view. Okay, you're going to find you're going to be overshooting things. And also, we currently have this leg so that the tool, the gizmo tool, is set up to object. What might help is double clicking again, switching it from object to world, and then moving it around in the world once you have the angle kind of the way you want it. The other thing that will help is going back into the quad view here and zooming in on the different angles so you can kind of see what you're working with here. Okay, I'm going to rotate this forward a little bit. And in our viewport, we can kind of see that the leg kind of comes down a little bit. This is a very short segment, so this may be too long still. Okay. All right, so we got that started. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to put a joint in because I'm going to connect them. Now, these joints are not going to look anything like the ones we're going to create real quick, but we are going to create those. But let's do a little bit of cleanup over here in our outliner first. So we have these two cameras that I created. If you've created them like I did, if you highlight them like this and you use your middle mouse button, you push down on the middle mouse button, you can drag it up and set it up next to the other cameras. And again, hit Control H to hide it. So we're going to hide those cameras. They're still usable. You're still seeing through them, but they're hidden. Now the image plane, I'm going to move this up out of the way as well, just kind of above everything. We've got the lower body named. We don't have the mid body, or we can just call it body since there's only 2 segments to the body. So if you double click on it, we're going to call this body. And then this sphere is the head, so double click, and we're going to name this head. All right? All right. So now we've got it pretty much started. And we've got things named. We're going to organize these as we move forward, and I'll show you what I mean by that as we start to create these legs. So this cylinder right here, we're not going to name it yet because we're going to end up using a naming convention for quite a few things. and we're going to have to name them once we kind of get them done. I think that'll work out a little bit better. Push this down just a little bit more so it's towards the edge of the body, like that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in another sphere. We're going to scale this down. I'm going to grab in the center here. If we grab the little center square, it scales everything evenly from all directions. Okay. Scale it down some more. As you can see, the leg is by no means, or this joint is by no means what the actual ant leg looks like, but we're not going to get into that level of detail modeling in this video. Alright, something like that. Close enough. Just so that it hides the end of that cylinder so it doesn't look like it's just kind of hanging out there. And we're trying to make something that looks like a plausible joint, something that might be considered realistic. Now we're going to select that upper cylinder, and we haven't done this yet, but this upper cylinder, if we have it selected and we hit Control D as in dog, so Control D, it duplicates it. You can see that here. Now we have this second cylinder, but it duplicates it and puts it right on top of the original cylinder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that off of here, and now you can see we have a second cylinder. If we take a look at the leg, this is a short piece, but this one is much longer, okay? And this one's actually kind of sticking out towards the front. So let's go ahead and rotate this. It's almost 90 degrees. And let's see how this is going to work. We're going to go ahead and rotate it this way. Not too far. Something like that, maybe. Now I'm going to put it into position. Actually, what I want to do, I'm going to scale it first. I'm going to make it longer. And it's also skinnier than the original one. So we're going to change our angle till we can see the plane that's sticking out here from the side. That allows us to scale it down in that direction evenly. And let's go ahead and line it up. We're going to have to rotate it as well. And again, sometimes it may make more sense to be in the object mode for movement, and sometimes it may be more sense to be in the world mode for movement. Like that. Okay. Got that started. Our scale is off on everything a little bit, but that's okay. Again, this is not it's supposed to be an identical, true to form, I guess. It's more of a stylized ant, I think. Alright, so we're going to do something like that. And now we're going to duplicate this sphere again, Control D. And this is why we didn't name them yet, because we're going to end up coming in and having to rename them anyhow. So we'll come back to that. And we're going to scale this down so that it's more to the scale of this part of the leg. And okay. Let's go ahead and duplicate this leg again. Control D. Hit E on the keyboard to rotate this. And it's going to be coming down towards the ground. And at this point, let's go ahead and put in a ground plane underneath this to help give us a reference to where we want our ant to actually be touching the ground. So we're going to jump off that for a second. Up here at the top, if you take a look, we have all of these additional shapes. And if you don't see a shape that you like, you can always go up into Create and under polygons, because that's what these are. These are polygons that we've been using. And there's a bunch of other shapes in here as well. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to use this one right here. It's called a plane. It's going to put the plane right in the center for us. I'm going to hit R on the keyboard, and I am going to grab this outer little square, and I'm just going to make this big enough. We're going to use that as a reference, and we're going to push it down just a little bit. Kind of give us a little bit of distance between the bottom of the ant and where our legs are going to be. We can come back and adjust that in a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and select our leg again. This is going to be shorter because we're going to actually put a foot on it as well. So we're going to actually use this full length right here of the ant, and then we'll just use this little we'll put a little joint and a foot on there as well. So we're going to go ahead and move this over a little bit. Drag it down. We can see that it's now penetrating the ground there. That's what we're wanting, but I'm going to pull this up forward a little bit. Okay, let's shrink it a little bit, I think. Now I'm going to put it back into into the world mode, into object mode. Drag it up a little bit better. I also did not scale it in thickness yet, and it's pretty close. It looks like it's pretty close down here, so we're going to leave that alone. I'm going to pull this off to the side out of the way. All right, and where are we at? I'm going to go ahead and select this. If you have trouble selecting, you can either zoom in closer, or you can also hit Q to quit the tool. I'm going to Control D to duplicate this again. I'm going to drop it down, pull it up, line it up with my model. Okay, and I think I need to shrink this down just a little bit more. Okay. And one more time, I'm going to duplicate this. Rotate it. Shrink it. This is going to be kind of that foot piece. And this is going to be smaller. I'm going to flatten it just a little bit. I'm going to just grab it on one side and push down. Flatten it out a little bit. And I am going to set it up so that it's actually in the plane. Just a little bit so it's touching the plane. Alright, so that is the start of the first leg, and it kind of matches what we're seeing here. Now, I'm not going to go through every single leg. We need to make 2 more legs. And I'm going to pause the video and let you work on the 2 legs. I do want to point out this middle leg here is pretty much the same length as this one right here. And even though it's a little skinnier in some aspects of the leg, I think because, again, we're making a stylized version of this, we can get away with duplicating this leg. So I think before I pause the video, I'm going to show you a process that allows us to do that, and also how to set this leg up, okay? So let's go ahead and do that first, and then I will pause and let you work on that final leg. We don't have to make all 6 legs. We can make these first 3, and then we can duplicate them, and I'll show you how we're going to do that as well. So first, what I want to do is I'm going to go through and identify the different parts of this leg now. So this is leg upper. Okay. This will be joint upper. This will be leg middle. This will be joint middle. Again, you can double click on it. This will be leg lower. Joint lower. Oh, crud. Nope. That is not joint lower. That was plain. I wasn't paying attention. Grabbed the wrong thing. All right, so this is actually, let's change this ground, this plane, and just call it ground. That was my bad. I missed that. Let's move this out of our way as well. I'm going to push this and drag it up all the way up here under the image plane. Now let's go ahead and go back in. This is going to be joint lower, and this will be foot. All right, so this is where we're going to do a little bit of we're going to learn a little bit about parenting and how to do parenting pretty simple. We're also going to learn about making a null group. So off here in the empty space, just kind of click out there, deselect everything so that you have nothing selected. I'm going to bring this up so we can see it. So now what we're going to do is, with nothing selected, hit Control G. So Control G as in golf, or girl, or giggle. Okay, and we end up with this null 1 here. We can double click on this, and we're going to call this leg, and we'll call this leg, I guess, front left. Something like that. So we know which one it is. What we're going to do is we're going to grab all of these leg pieces. So just highlight them all, just like I did. Click here, hold shift, and click down here. And we're going to use our middle mouse button, and we're going to put it inside of that folder we just created. It's basically a folder. And now everything is a child of that empty null group. So if we selected it, it'll select that entire leg. But what we're going to do also is we're going to set it up so that if we want to remove these joints, right now if I move something, it's going to require me to move everything below it. So this is sort of like setting up a joint system or a skeletal system that you might do, but a little bit not quite the same way, but it's similar. Okay. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my foot, middle mouse button, click and drag, and drop it onto the joint lower. And notice what happens. We get this little plus symbol. If I hit that plus, you'll see that the foot is now a child of that joint. Now I'm going to click on that joint lower. You have to click on it every time. And I'm going to drag it up and drop it onto the next one above it. So now this is a child of the lower joint, and joint lower is now a child of leg lower. I'm going to click on that, middle mouse button, drag it up to joint middle. And you can see that the same process is happening. So now I'm going to select on the joint middle, bring that up, click on it again, middle mouse button, drag it up, click on it again, middle mouse button, and drag it up. And what we have done is basically set it up so that our leg is completely set up so that we can now, if I clicked on a parent, so if I clicked on this joint right here, so if I picked on joint upper, and I would decide that I wanted to reposition how this leg looks, I could click on it and drag it, and all the other pieces below it will now move with it, so I don't have to continually move every piece underneath and get it all lined up, just like we did before. Okay. Now the other thing about this is if I select this leg front left, okay, and do a Control D to duplicate it, I now have duplicated that leg. Okay. And I can hit E, I can rotate it. All of the children are under this one, just like that one had, but now see it says left 1, and we'll fix that name in a second. And one of the things that might get a little confusing, so the null group that was created, the second null group, the duplicate, has its center point down here. If we click on the upper left leg right here, it will still have everything selected, and it will allow us to move it around. And again, we can do the same thing as we did before. We can change its orientation from world. Actually, that's not what I wanted to do. We can go to world, and now we can more easily move it around in the world orientation. And start to set it up so that our ant is now got multiple legs. That's our second leg. Right here we're going to name this. Instead of front, this is middle. And we'll call it left as well. And okay. Now we can go ahead and do this one more time and set up a third leg. What you're going to need to do though is you'll need to go in and scale it so that it is different size. When you start to scale it, you're going to see there's going to kind of really start to affect the shape of these. So one thing you can do is you could unparent these. So if you right click, or if you click on it rather, go to File, and let me do that with a demo one before I do this. Let me click on this here. Let's do Control D for our third one. Okay. And if I select it, go to File, Edit rather, do Unparent. Actually, I have to select everything. There we go. And what will happen is it'll start to break everything out. And you could unparent everything all at once. You would think selecting the top one would do that, but no. Now you can go in and you can adjust each one of these individually without causing damage. You can scale it, move things around, and then go back through the process of reparent it the way I showed you before. So I'm going to go ahead and pause because we're getting quite long on this video, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to get your legs set up. I'm going to get my legs set up, and then when we come back, I'll show you how to create the other side of legs from these that we already have. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pause. Okay, so welcome back. As you can see, I now have my 3 legs, and they are set up so that they are, parent and children all the way through, and put into the larger empty null. So there's one thing that we need to do, and that is also go through, and when we are naming these, we also need to make sure that each one of these has a distinct, unique name from the ones in the other groups. Because if we do that, we're going to end up with some issues when we try to mirror these. So let's go ahead and that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and have to go through and name these. So basically this will be leg upper, and we'll call this front. Okay, and these will all be front. These right here, we're going to do middle. And then these right here will be back. And you'll need to name each one of these joint upper front, leg middle front. These will be middle, upper middle, middle middle, joint middle middle. Okay, so that each one of these has a unique name to it, different than the other legs in the other groups. And we're going to have to do that so that we can properly duplicate these. So I'm going to go ahead and pause again and let you do that. Okay, so hopefully you're done renaming and getting our naming convention correct. So here you can see an example. Basically, I did these leg upper front, and the reason why I didn't put left in all these or on all these here is because, again, it would be the exact same name. These groups each need to have different names. And I didn't want to get this too complicated. And the other thing is when we go to mirror these, basically we're going to rename them to the right. And we don't want to have to go through and rename all of these a second time. So we'll just rename the top level group name, and then everything underneath will be self-explanatory because it's under that group. All right, so let's go ahead and do a mirror real quick. All right, so what we want to do is we're going to select, we could try doing all three of these at once. Let's try that. It may not work the first time, but we'll see. So we're going to go ahead and select just the upper portion of each one of these so that the whole leg is highlighted, and you can see that the change color as we start to select them. The green is the last selection we did, and the white are the previous selections. Okay, so once they're selected, hold down the shift button and the right mouse button, and when you do that you can see that there's a whole bunch of other menu options in here. What we want to do is we want to go down to the one that says mirror right here. Now you're holding the right mouse button down still. So you're still holding the right mouse button down. And over the one, there's a little box over here to the right. These are option boxes. Anytime you see this, that means that there are settings that you can go in and you can change. For the mirror, we want to hover over the option box and then let go of the right mouse button. And when you do that, this will pop open. Okay. Another way to get to this is up here under Mesh, Mirror, and then right here, option box. Okay, a lot of the things we're going to do are up here, but I'm trying to teach you to start using your mouse tools a little bit more than just relying on these menus up here, because everything you can get to can be more quickly done through using your mouse and the quick keys. All right, so now with our mirror option selected here, what we want to do is there's a few settings we want to change. Okay, we are going to mirror the axis position to the world. We are going to change it to whatever direction we want our mirroring to happen. And if we take a look, I'm going to move this out of the way for a second. Initially when I was setting this up, I should have realized that Z should be to the right and X would have been there. This is my X line here. I wanted to actually build my model this direction. That's why my cameras aren't working out, but I was talking and got distracted. Bad on me. And that's okay if you're doing the same thing I did as well. That's perfectly fine because we can still do mirroring in any other directions we need to. But so what we're going to do is when we rotate and we look at this, we're going to see which direction we want to mirror our legs. And in this case, looking at my gizmo down here, I see that the Z direction is the direction where I want to put my legs. Okay, I want them to go here. Now if you're looking at yours and it shows it in the X direction, then you're going to want to use the X radial button selection. What I mean by that is the mirror axes. Right here, you can go X, Y, or Z. Hopefully you're not building it upward. Hopefully you're building it sideways. But then again, if you're building a bug that is upward, maybe you need to go Y. But I know I need to choose the Z direction because this is the direction that my legs are going to go, in the Z direction. And then we have our mirror direction choices. And they're either going to be positive or negative. Okay? So if you're not sure whether it's positive or negative right here for your mirror direction, and you can hit the little down arrow. what we can do is we can select and see where our currently are at, and we're negative in the Z direction right now. So this leg is in the negative direction for translate. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to select everything again. And come back here, and I believe I want to go in the positive direction for the Z, but if not, we can always undo it. The other thing I don't want to do, okay, it was combined with originals. I don't want these to be connected together. I want them to be separate. If we do a combine with original, when we mirror it, basically it'll take it and it'll make it so that it's one piece. So it'll be all connected together. Even if they're physically located apart and you can visibly see that there's a gap between them, Maya will treat them as if they are one piece, okay? So we don't want that, so we're going to uncheck that, okay? When we do that, the rest of this gets undone. So once that's done, instead of hitting mirror, we're going to just hit the apply button because we want the window to stay open. If we hit the mirror button, this window will go away. I'm going to hit apply, and it looks like it works. All right, so there we go. Now, my image is in the way. Now we've got all 6 legs. And let's take a look at what that means for us down here. Okay, and oops, looks like we've got a little thing going on here. Let's see here, what happened? All right, so basically what appears to have happened is because I tried to do them all at the same time, it only took the foot for the 3, since that was the last piece selected, and made those separate. So you can see that here, this foot is not attached to that. So let's do Control Z and undo what we just did, get rid of those legs. So mirroring is not going to work for this occasion, and that's okay. So we can see that this is not a viable solution, but don't give up. There is an actual way that we can make this work, and it's pretty simple, okay? So we're going to select the top leg up here, select this top one, and what we're going to do is, remember, in the past we did a Control D, so we're going to duplicate that. Okay, and now we have a duplicate complete setup down here. We're going to go here to our attribute editor. Okay, and since I want to put this in the negative direction here, okay, right here where our, let's see here, right here on scale, what we want to do is we want to go to the negative Z, so X, Y, Z. So in front of the 1, I'm going to put a negative. I'm going to hit enter. Okay. And now what it's done is it has taken that leg from here and it has put it into the negative Z direction for me. Even though it's scale, I know that makes it's a little confusing. What it does is it gives us this negative direction, and we actually have it down here as 2 separate pieces, just like this is up here. And you can see that it says left 1. We're going to name this right, okay? And we can just go RT for right. All right, okay, so now we've got that leg done, and we're going to repeat that process. We're going to pick the middle leg. We're going to go ahead and hit Control D, duplicate it again right here. Now for me, mine is again in the negative Z direction. If yours is in the X direction, you're going to put the -1 right here in front of the X for -1 right there. So you can pick a -1 in the X. I'm putting mine there, and what did I do here? Okay, let me see here. Control D. Oh, I see why. Okay, I see why. So here's another issue where we're going to run into some problems, okay? And we're going to have to get this fixed. So again, if I put the -1 here, oops, that was a 1, not a negative. Let's try that again. You can see that it's not doing exactly what we want it to do. So why is that? Well, that's because if we take a look at what's different between these two, I'm going to go ahead and Control Z that out of there. If we take a look at this first one here, see our position of it is all zeroed out right here, okay? If we take a look at the second one, we are not zeroed out. Instead, we actually have a rotation of -33, or +33 rather, and a -1.2 up here for our translate. We've moved it. And we're going to run into that same issue with the back one because we moved these, right? We duplicated them and then we rotated them and we moved them and created some new pieces out of these originals. that are zeroed out. The original worked out at 0. Okay, when we created that group, it zeroed this out for me. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to select this middle up right here, so the top one. We're going to go up here to modify, and right here we talked about freeze transformations. When we hit freeze transformations, it's going to zero everything out over here, and we're going to do the same thing here. Okay. When we do that, it zeroes all that out, so now that it starts out as this being the 0 location. The benefit of that is if I were to grab this, for example, and I hit W, I move it out of here, I'm like, oh man, I can't remember where it was. But if we froze our transformations and we hit 0, it's going to put it right back to where it was before. So that's the nice thing about freezing the transformations. The other thing that's nice about it is now, if I select it, I hit Control D, I go to my Z, for me, -1 for Z. Okay, it does rotate it. Didn't do exactly what it was supposed to do, but that's okay. I can move it over to the body and put it on there like I want to. And I can do the same thing with this back one. D. Actually, let me think about this for a second. Yeah, no, that's what I want to do. Never mind. I'm overthinking it. Wrong spot. Let's try that again. There we go. Then I can move it, hook it up to the body. There we go. Okay, so now we've got all 6 legs done, and they are independent so that we could come in and move these if we wanted to, just the way we did the other ones. And you could articulate them in different directions as you wanted to do it. One thing you may want to do before you do that is freeze your transformations again, so that if you move or rotate things, it doesn't deform the joints. That was one of the issues we probably ran into when we moved these a little bit. And it doesn't deform the legs themselves. Okay, so now we've got that done. I still want to use the mirror tool and show you how that works. And we're going to actually do that with this next piece. We're going to create the eyes, and we're also going to create the antenna. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. We're going to create the eye just using a simple sphere. Okay. We're going to scale it down. We're just going to move it. And let me see here. Somewhere in here. Like that. Okay, so now with that set up, I want it to be exactly in the other side. Of course, this time I managed to put it on the wrong side of the head. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to fix that. So, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this eye. And actually, I think I want to modify it just a little bit. Before we do that, I'm going to elongate it just a little bit. And I am going to rotate it so that it's more like that. And I'm going to put it in. Give the head just a little bit. Kind of give it a little bit more shape to it. Okay. So I've got it on this side of the head, but that's okay because again, with the mirror, like we talked about before we didn't use it, we can adjust for that. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and hold and go to mirror. So that was the shift button, and hold my shift button, right mouse click and hold it down, and then it'll bring up this tool, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. And now instead of being on the positive side of the Z, I want it to go and mirror on the negative side of the Z. And we hit apply, and it automatically pops that into the head for me into the same location. Okay? So it looks like it might be just a little bit off, maybe. Let's see here. Just a little bit. I think maybe more like that. Okay. And it may be because the head isn't exactly conforming the same on both sides, and that's all right. Okay, so, and if you have made it so your head's tilted or turned or whatever, you may have to make some adjustments, but you get the idea. You can duplicate it just like that. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to make the antenna for our ant, and then our model will be complete. And I've gone through some of the different tools and processes for you, okay? And then the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to wrap all this up so that everything is tied together. So when we made that mirror, what happened is it basically put it here into this little parenting setup. And we take a look at it, you see that we have this transform here. So what I want to do is I'm going to select that, I'm going to right click, or I don't know why I want to keep right clicking. I'm going to click on that, go up to edit, and I'm going to unparent that and put that eye out so that it's not inside there. I'm going to delete that transform that was left in there, that little grouping, because what I want to do instead is I want the eye to actually be these two eyes. So we're going to name these eye. This is eye left. And this will be eye right. Okay, we're going to select both of these. I'm going to drag it up, and I'm going to collapse actually some of these so we can do this a little bit more easily. Let's see here, where are we at? Collapse all these legs down. Okay, so I'm going to select those. I'm going to middle mouse button, click and drag and drop it here to the head so that now they're children under the head, so that if I move the head around, the eyes will go with the head. We have our lower body and the middle part of the body. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we're going to create an antenna, and we're going to mirror it or duplicate it depending on which process works better. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a cylinder for that. Pull it out here. And I am going to scale it down. So hit R on your keyboard. And I can't see it there because it's under the head. Scale it down quite a bit. Okay, then I'm going to put it up on top of the head area and just kind of get a feel for how big it is in comparison to the body. It looks pretty big. I think I might scale it down in height just a little bit. But as we go to shape it, it will look a little bit better, I think. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to learn about another menu inside of Maya here and a process. What we're going to do is we're going to go into deform. Okay, so up here at the top under the modeling section, we're going to go to deform. And what we want to do is we want to go to non-linear right here, non-linear, and we're going to select bend. So let's pick the little option box. Okay. And we're going to talk about this for a second. Now, there's nothing we're going to really change in here, okay? But you can come in and you could set up some limitations for how the object is going to bend. There's one other thing we got to do while I'm looking at this is as we take a look at our cylinder, another tool that we get to learn how to do is there are no segments in this cylinder. See, there's no There are no horizontal lines, they're all vertical. So this is basically like a steel rod. No matter what I wanted to do, I won't be able to bend this. But we do want to bend it, so we need to give it some segments in order to be able to bend it properly. The way we're going to do that is with the tool select, with the cylinder selected, and in the attributes editor right here, we're going to go to P cylinder 1 right here. Okay, and that is the wrong spot. There we go. Poly cylinder, and it may have a 2 after it or whatever, but poly cylinder is where we want to go. And then right here are our subdivisions. We have 20 axes subdivisions, which is this direction, around it. So you can see we have 20 of these lines in here. But we don't have any here. We only have one large section here for the height. Okay. So what I'm going to do is right in here, I am going to put in 30 and see what that looks like. I think that will work okay. Okay. We could put more in, but the thing is, when we are working with models, every time we create an additional line, we create more polygons for your computer to keep track of. Before we put these segments in, this was just one long, even though it's long, it was just one polygon, and basically it had 4 lines to it, 4 edges, so it had 1, 2 on either side. Okay. 1, 2 on either side, and then a third one here, and then all the way at the other end of this object, this cylinder, it had another one. So it was just really one polygon. But now we've added 30 subdivisions to it, so we significantly increased just in this one spot the number of polygons that your computer has to keep track of. Okay, and when you're making video games and things like that, the more polygon counts you have, the more your computer has to keep track of, along with also making the game. So, just something to be aware of when you do these things, and if it's for a game asset, that might be something you need to think about. Alright, so now we've got our segments in there. We're going to go ahead and just hit apply, or create. We can hit create. We can hit create, this will go away. We'll hit create, and now it goes away, the window goes away, and we have this semicircle with those numbers that we left in there. So it's bent along this way. And if we take a look over here on the right hand side, now we have this bend 1 tab that's been added to this. And our curvature is right here. Our curvature is set at 90 degrees. We can adjust this curvature, okay, until we kind of get it to the angle that we want it to look like. Okay. And if we wanted to move this around, now we could select both of these. Just kind of pull it up a little bit to get a better view of what it looks like. But as we start to move things around with these, if we move it off axis, it may cause some issues. It actually seems to be okay. I do a rotation though. Oh yeah, sure, you work here. Okay, so we can rotate it around until we get to the position that we want it to be in. But what I want to do is, once I get the look that I'm wanting, I'm going to pull this down, move it around a little bit, just kind of get the feel for what it looks like on my model. And I don't necessarily want it to be facing this way, but as I start to rotate it this direction, we may run into some issues trying to move it. It actually seems to be doing okay so far. Okay. Alright, so all in all, it's not too bad for initial. Okay. Go back to the bend. I think maybe that's kind of what I'm looking for right there. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the P cylinder right here, and I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate it, and I'm going to pull that off of here. Then I'm going to select the bend handle and the P cylinder, the original ones there, and I'm going to delete those. And now I have my curvature that I want for this antenna. I'm going to set it up. And I think I'm going to rotate just a little bit more forward. All right, something like that. Now the next thing I want to do is I do want to modify the end of the antenna here. I'm going to do a marquee select and select this entire group right here. I'm going to hit R, and I am going to change that to world from object. And I'm going to go ahead and scale it down in this plane right here. Start to scale it down. And then I'm going to do a marquee select of just this group. Do the same thing. And then a marquee select of just this group. And bring that down even further. So I have a tapered end to it there. So now what we can do is you could make a second one for the other side of the head, and that way you can angle it and it would be unique. Or you can just mirror this one. I'm just going to mirror it again to show you the mirror process. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Go back to my object mode, select the antenna. First I'm going to go ahead and rename this antenna. I'm going to go ahead and hold the, this time actually I'm going to go up to mesh. I'm going to go to mirror, select the option box. And again, I want to go in the negative direction of the Z. So everything should stay the same. I'm going to go ahead. And when I do this, it's going to do the same thing as it did before. It's going to combine them, combine everything. And that's okay. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup that, or unparent it. Oops. Got to actually select the thing you want to unparent. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Okay, so now we've got two antennae, and you notice these just turned green. And the reason for that is when I deleted the transform, it also deleted the material that is associated with this particular part of the model. And that is actually going to lead us into the next piece of our lesson here, and that is applying materials to our ant to make it look more realistic. But before we do that, let's go ahead and do a couple things here. First, I'm going to name these antenna so I know which one it is. Okay, and this will be antenna right. And then I'm going to take both of these, and I'm also going to hold the middle mouse button and drop them down here on the head so that they're connected to the head. And these antenna, we're going to end up applying material to those eventually. All right, so with that, now let's go ahead and make it so that we can move this model as an entire piece without having to do a marquee select, which when we go to move it around and rotate it, it would cause some issues. Okay, so first what I want to do is I am going to do a marquee select of everything. So I'm going to marquee select that like that. And it's okay that I got the ground plane as well. And what I want to do is I'm going to go up here to edit. I'm going to do a delete by type. I'm going to delete the history. So we're going to get rid of all the history memory that can sometimes cause issues with your model. And with it still selected, I'm going to go up to modify, and we're going to freeze our transformations. So everything is zeroed out. And when I did that, I broke the legs. Okay. Okay, so sometimes we might run into this issue where we go to freeze transformations and something really weird happens, okay? And what has happened is that we didn't freeze the transformations on these front legs prior to putting it into the group. So even though they were zeroed out, they've still got some issues with their location in the subset underneath the group or the parent for these So we're going to hit Control Z, and if you just did that, okay, then this is how to fix it. So we put Control Z, it's going to go back to here, and what we're going to do is we're going to fix that by selecting the front leg. I'm going to go to Display, or Modify rather, and we're going to freeze the transformations individually first on these, okay? And then the front right one, I'm going to modify freeze transformation so that everything sub underneath it is going to go ahead and get fixed as well. Let's just double check that real quick. It does. All right, so now let's go ahead and do a Marquee Select again. And now we should be able to go to modify freeze transformations, and everything will be fixed the way it should be. Now the next thing we want to do is, again, click off into the empty space out here so you have nothing selected. And we're going to go ahead and do a Control G again and create a null again over here. Double click on it, and we're just going to call this ant. Okay. What I want to do is I'm going to grab these pieces here and I'm going to stick them in under ant. Okay. So I'm going to highlight everything, middle mouse button, hold it and drag it and drop it onto ant. And now everything should be underneath our ant as a total. And if I select it and I hit W, I should be able to move my ant around however I want to be able to position it. And I should be able to also rotate it without odd things happening to different parts of the ant as we move it. All right. Okay, I think that's going to do it for now. This video has been almost an hour and 50 minutes long. We got quite in depth and learned a lot of new tools inside of Maya, and kind of made this stylized bug that we're going to then apply materials to, and then also learn a little bit about textures in our next video. So hopefully you learned a lot, and you're able to apply some of this. Maybe you've made your own bug while we were following along, or maybe you made the exact same ant I was making. Either way, I hope that you benefit from this video and learning some of the different tools and some of the methods to making a 3D model. If you missed out on the previous video, or you want to go back and revisit it, you can always go to my YouTube channel right here at Putting on the Fritz 3D Visualization, and check that out. You can also, while you're there, subscribe to my channel. Check out some of the stuff I have on Unreal Engine and also in Unity, and a lot of other content on Maya and Maya 3D modeling as well. Again, like this video, leave any comments if you have any questions, or if you just want to tell me something, leave me a comment, and subscribe to my video, and subscribe to my channel rather. Talk to you later.